My name is Nate Calloway, and I want to tell you something about humans that most species never figure out until it is too late. We are not the strongest creatures in the galaxy. We are not the strongest creatures in the galaxy. We are not the fastest or the longest lived or the most gifted with any particular ability that makes us stand out in the crowd. But we have something that does not show up in any xenobiology report ever written about us. And it is the one thing that has kept us alive in places that should have finished us off a long time ago. We simply refuse to accept that something is impossible until we have personally tried it and failed. And even then, we usually try again. That quality had saved my life before. On Varren Station 3 years ago, when a reactor coupling blew, and I spent 4 hours in a suit with a failing oxygen system fixing it by hand because the alternative was not acceptable to me. On the Kepler run 2 years ago, when pirates boarded my hauler and found out that a human with a multi-tool and 6 hours of preparation time is considerably more dangerous than he looks. And now, apparently, on a planet called Drevos 4, which every species in the outer systems agreed was completely and thoroughly unsurvivable. I had not planned to land on Drevos 4. My navigation system had a different opinion. The system failure happened 3 hours outside the Drevos system, fast and total, the kind of cascade that gives you just enough time to understand what is happening before you stop having options. I had 2 functional thrusters, no guidance system, and a trajectory that was going to put me on the surface of the nearest large body whether I liked it or not. Drevos 4 was the nearest large body. I used the 2 thrusters to control the angle of entry as best I could, burned off speed against the upper atmosphere, until my hull temperature was at the absolute edge of what the ship could handle. Burned off speed against the upper atmosphere, until my hull temperature was at the absolute edge of what the ship could handle, and brought her down in a valley between 2 mountain ranges that my passive scanners told me was the flattest terrain within range. The landing was not graceful, but I walked away from it, which is the only kind of landing that matters. I stepped outside and took my first breath of Drevos 4 air, which my suit filters told me was breathable, but unpleasant, with a chemical composition that would cause significant respiratory damage after extended exposure. The sky was a deep amber, and the light that came through it had a heavy quality, like late afternoon on a world that was always tired. The vegetation, if that was the right word for it, was dark and low and moved even when there was no wind. Everything about the place felt wrong in a quiet, patient way, like it was waiting for me to make a mistake. I went back inside and started taking inventory. The ship was not flying again, that much was clear. But the communication array was intact, which meant I could send a distress signal, and the emergency beacon had activated on impact, which meant someone might already be looking. I had food and water for 3 weeks, medical supplies, engineering tools, and the multi-tools that had never once let me down. I started working. The days on Drevos 4 were shorter than Earth standard, and the nights were longer and considerably colder, and the local wildlife was creative in ways that kept me alert and inventive in equal measure. Something large moved around the ship on the second night, and on the third morning I found marks in the ground outside that told me it was larger than I wanted to meet directly. I modified the hull lights to pulse on a pattern that my reading on Dravosi wildlife suggested would register as territorial and left them running through the night. It worked, which I was genuinely pleased about because the alternative had been less appealing. On the 6th day, the communication array picked up a response signal. It was a Kelvari survey vessel, 3 days out, which had caught my beacon on a routine pass through the outer system. The voice on the comm was female, precise, and carried the tone of someone who was already managing several things at once, and had just added an unexpected human to the list. "Drevos 4, she said, and there was a pause that told me she was checking her records. "You landed on Drevos 4. "Technically, my navigation system landed on Drevos 4, I said. "I just did the best I could with what I had." Another pause. "No human has survived more than 2 days on that planet's surface," she said carefully. "How many days has it been for me?" I asked. "Your beacon activated 6 days ago." "Then I suppose I am the first," I said. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. I had learned to recognize the particular quiet that happened when someone from another species encountered a human doing something that did not fit their existing understanding of what humans could do. Her name was Commander Yale Sorm, and she kept the comm open for most of the 3 days it took her to reach me, which I appreciated more than I said out loud because the nights on Drevos 4 were long and the sounds outside were not company I enjoyed. We talked about a great many things. She told me about the survey routes she ran through the outer systems, the same corridors every season, charting changes in stellar patterns that shifted so slowly that a single researcher would never see the full picture in one lifetime. I told her about Varan Station and the Kepler run and the multi-tool that had more hours on it. And my ship. She asked me once, on the second night, why I had kept working after the crash instead of simply waiting. I thought about it honestly before I answered. Because waiting and doing nothing feel the same from the outside. I said, but they feel completely different from the inside. I said, but they feel completely different from the inside, and I cannot stand the feeling of doing nothing when there is something to be done. She was quiet for a moment. The survey reports on humans, she said slowly. What about them? I said. They describe your species as mid-tier by most measurable standards, she said. They are not wrong. I said. They are incomplete, she said. They measure what you are, they do not measure what you decide to be. I did not have an answer for that, so I just sat with it for a while in the amber dark of Drevos, while something large moved carefully around the perimeter of my pulsing lights, and decided again that I was not worth the trouble. Her ship came over the horizon on the morning of the 9th day, dropping through the amber sky in a long, smooth arc that was the most welcome thing I had ever seen. She landed 300 meters from my wreck and walked across the dark ground to meet me, tall and precise in Calvary survey gear, with the careful eyes of someone who cataloging things for a living and was currently cataloging me. She stopped in front of me and looked at the ship and the modifications I had made to the hull lights and the camp I had set up and the notes I had been taking on local wildlife patterns, because I had nothing else to do with my evenings. 9 days, she said. 9 days, I agreed. How? She said. I picked up my multi-tool from the camp table and put it in my pocket, and I looked at the amber sky one last time before I was ready to never see it again. One problem at a time, I said, and never stopped moving. She looked at me with those careful eyes for a long moment. Then she turned toward her ship and said, without looking back, "Come, I will show you where you can clean up. And then I want to hear about every day of those 9. I picked up my bag and followed her across the dark ground toward the ship, and I thought about how strange it was that the worst navigation failure of my career had landed me. Quite literally, exactly where I was supposed to be. The survey vessel lifted off Druvos. 4:40 minutes later, and I watched the amber sky fall away beneath us, through the viewport, and felt the particular relief of a person who has been somewhere very difficult for a very long time and is finally genuinely going somewhere else. Yale stood beside me at the viewport, not saying anything, just watching the planet shrink below us the way someone watches something they have studied for a long time and are now seeing differently. You know, she said quietly, I have passed Drevos 447 times in 4 years, and never once considered landing on it. Smart, I said. Perhaps, she said. But I have also never spent 9 days learning exactly what is down there. I looked at her, and she was still watching the planet, and there was something in her expression that I recognized. Not admiration, exactly, but the particular look of someone whose understanding of something has just permanently changed. Your notes on the wildlife patterns, she said. I want to read them properly. They are yours, I said. Consider them a contribution to the survey record. She looked at me then, and something in those careful eyes was warm in a way that had not been there when she first walked across the dark ground to meet me. Make Calloway, she said. That is me, I said. The survey reports, she said, are going to need a new section. I looked back at Drevos 4, small now and amber and patient below us, waiting quietly for Thirdit. Next thing that would make the mistake of underestimating it. Tell them to make it a long one, I said. We are full of surprises.